Some of the contents of this video are going to shock you, but it is important for your family and Australia as a whole that you understand what is going on right now. I'm going to give you the guts of the story, offer a warning about what is in store for us, and offer actions we can take to avoid the atrocities of global corporations. If you want to know more detail, there are links associated with this video. The actions of the Whitlam government and successive Australian governments has led us into a very deep, dark corporate black hole, where we as a people may lose our rights, our land and our country. As Australians, we can be complacent when it comes to government. Most people have blindly trusted the government to look after the people of Australia. The Australian Constitution 1901 served as the foundation with the way we operated in Australia and defined the relationship with the Crown, including oaths of office, a range of other provisions we as a Commonwealth were required to follow, not the least of which was the proper creation and enactment of legislation in support of the people. The Australian Constitution 1901 very clearly places the power with the people, not the government. It is the will of the people that drives decisions, or at least it is supposed to be. In 1973, the Whitlam government decided to change the Australian Constitution. Normally, a constitutional change requires a referendum, initiated by the people. Whitlam ignored this requirement, despite advice from the then Attorney General that it was not constitutional. 44 changes were applied to a copied version of the Australian Constitution 1901 to produce what was effectively an Australian Government Corporation Constitution. References to the Queen and Crown were removed, being replaced with references to an Australian Queen who neither physically existed nor held any power. The Whitlam government had initiated a sleight of hand, transferring the power to themselves as a corporation and ignoring the Crown. The Australian government had gone from a people's government to a corporate government, an entity which was not required to meet due process as defined by the Crown. Successive governments have continued the charade and expanded on the corporate power granted to them. The corporate structure extends down through the state government and includes your local council. We are blindly paying taxes and rates to corporations that have no right to charge us. Did you know the Australian government, at least the corporate version, is actually listed on the US Stock Exchange? Corporations do deals with corporations. The Australian corporate government is in bed with the globalist corporations like the United Nations and their counterparts in the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum, to name a few. The term United Nations is otherwise a term for what they want to become, that is one world government, but what is otherwise just a corporate structure aimed at gaining money and power and control over our nation's people. This is why we are enduring a period where there are massive impacts on our country and levels of overreach never seen before in the history of Australia. They are attempting to put draconian systems and controls in place to remove our freedom and rights, including body autonomy. It is a corporation, a business doing this, with people masquerading as government ministers. Ministers are not sworn the oath of office as defined in the Australian Constitution 1901. They have simply sworn an oath to their corporation. They are the government only by name, the name of their corporation. You may be doubting what I'm saying because it is devoid of moral and ethical foundation. It is, however, dead easy to prove all this. The only way you can change the Constitution is via a referendum. If you compare the current corporatised Australian Constitution to the Australian Constitution 1901, they are not the same, yet we have never had a referendum for many of the changes. Further, there are recordings of the oaths and signatures required for all Australian ministers. Either the oaths are not correct, or there is no signature as per the requirement of the Australian Constitution 1901. Snap. Australians have been betrayed. The government we entrusted to look after us is selling us out. The nasty spit is yet to come. The Albanese corporate government's next move is to facilitate the transfer of land rights over to the United Nations via the mechanism of the Voice referendum. Yes, that's right, we will no longer have control of our land if the Voice referendum result is a yes. Under the Australian Constitution 1901, the people are the only ones to initiate a referendum. Do you really think this referendum was initiated by the people, or politically driven and therefore illegal? Albanese is selling the Voice under the guise of looking after the First Nations people. He has made around $31 million available to run a yes campaign despite doing so violating the referendum law. The government corporation is already spending around $4.5 billion a year of your money to run the National Indigenous Australian Agency, employing around 1,300 people to report the needs and requirements of Indigenous people to Cabinet. Don't you think that is enough to make the voice of the First Nations people heard? The Albanese government is also not discussing the proposed changes to the international health regulations that will otherwise grant power to the WHO to dictate how Australia would manage any declared emergency, pandemic or otherwise, in this country. The WHO would have the power to impose mandated vaccinations, mandated treatments and mandated lockdowns, with the Australian Government Corporation legally bound to comply. This is happening despite the fact adverse reactions to the vaccines recommended by and continued to be promoted by the WHO and the Australian government have caused massive adverse reactions in our population, and we currently have around 16% excess deaths in this country. Not from COVID, but following the failed vaccine rollout. Massive issues are also being experienced by vaccinated pregnant women worldwide. Vaccine producers like Bill Gates, who happens to be the second highest funder of the WHO after China, made hundreds of millions of dollars out of the vaccine rollout. Can you see the pattern? The corporate game of the globalists doesn't stop there. We can add programmable central bank digital currency, where you'll not be able to spend your currency on anything the globalists don't want you to, and it will have an expiry date. Then there are smart cities where you'll be tracked and not allowed to go any further than 15 minutes from home, except with permission or penalty. Then there is the climate change lie, that will restrict what you can do based on the supposed carbon being released, when all the while is just another way to control you. And this little package is then tied together in digital ID, tracking of your health records, your social media activity, your banking, and your physical movement, to mention but a few. If you express an opinion other than the accepted narrative, you will be turned off. The Albanese corporate government is allowing this all to progress. Meanwhile, the source of power for our people, the real Australian Constitution 1901, remains underneath. We are at a critical stage. Our real Australian Constitution 1901 grants power to the people. We have just been conditioned to think the corporate government is in control. Your future, your freedoms and rights, and those of your kids are in clear and present danger. Firstly, we need to spread the message far and wide that the government is not legitimate and we will not stand for it. Don't just tell your family or neighbour. Be brave, tell the world. Unite as true Australians can. Secondly, make the current corporation government accountable for their actions, and at every opportunity ask them for proof of authority, as the real Constitution grants you the right to do, to take the actions that they are. Thirdly, support the many groups around Australia highlighting the potential impacts of the globalist projects on our people and our country. Like their posts, share their posts, watch their videos. They are working for you. Fourthly, form your own local government council, as the real Constitution grants you the right to do, and place the masquerading local council back in the box. We need to take our country back. To do that, we need to act as one. A very small percentage of our 26 million people are in on this game. Now you know all this, stop for a couple of seconds and think about yours and your children's future. We have the numbers. We as a people can't afford to be sitting on our ass right now. You have been warned. Act now.